we've done vision therapy here. I learned how to do vision therapy from my father. He was an optometrist before me, obviously before me, and we worked together for some time. He learned from some pretty interesting people at what is now Southern California College of Optometry. I learned from some interesting people at Pacific University, and and what our goal, initially our goal was, of course, to treat people to make them better. Right. That's why we're in business, is let's make them better. And it was obvious that when you make eyes work together, when you increase, the technical term is binocularity. When you increase binocularity, then people do better. They read better, that kind of thing. The part that again has been a little missing is the data behind that. Okay. We have lots and lots of case studies where we can excuse me, if we I can call up different people and say, would you be willing to say, we're nice people and that kind of thing, and you read better, that sort of thing. A lot of doctors have that kind of stuff, but we don't have masses of data that we've published where I can put it in nice graphs and things like that and say people got better. So that's been one of the prime motivators for us, and I started writing case studies a long time ago now. Everything is a long time ago now, but we were able to do a study at Job Corps in Curlew. Curlew is 8 miles from the Canadian border, so they're about 2.5 hours from here, something like that, when the weather's good. Yeah. Yeah. And so we were able to do a defined treatment without a lot of intervention, because we treated them up there in Curlew. We were able to do a defined treatment that isolated the specific thing that we treat the most, that we diagnose the most, and that's the technical term on that is intermittent central suppression. Mm-hmm. Intermittent means on and off. Central is the central area of sight, and suppression is the dropping out of the picture. And so we were able to treat that in isolation up there and make a bunch of these guys better. And so then I was able to publish that in one of our better journals. I spoke about these kinds of things last, it was January or February, I think, to optometrists on the east side of Washington at Gonzaga University. And one of the people I brought up was a guy at Job Corps. And as I said to them, and this is cold and harsh and judgmental, and I know that, but I said to them, this is probably not a guy that's going to go to Stanford. He's probably not going to end up being a rocket scientist. But when we straightened out his eyes, what changed on him was his ability to line bricks up. So Job Corps tries to get people their high school diploma or GED, and then get a skill. Well, his skill was bricklaying, and so he straightened out his eyes, and son of a gun, he could line up bricks. And so that at this meeting I was speaking at, I asked them. So, and of course nobody would answer at a meeting. Come on, Right. But I asked them, so what difference have we made in this guy's life because he can align bricks? And nobody would answer. But after we, when we took a break, one of the guys came up to me and he said, you know, you're probably talking like $30,000 or $40,000 a year. And, you know, that's right. And was there anything in our treatment where we taught him to align bricks? No, no. I don't know how to lay bricks. And I would probably hurt myself laying bricks. And I would probably, whoever was next to the brick wall sometime would be crushed by the brick wall falling on them. So that's not my expertise. But by getting his eyes so they worked, so he could align bricks, now he's a functional man out in the marketplace. So that's what we do. A lot of what we started with, what I started with, is the diagnosis. Intermittent central suppression, again, is a problem in both eyes working together. And so what I do is put people in a test environment where I've got one eye seeing one thing and one eye seeing another thing. So I can show you that if you want to look at it.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's do it.
All right, so you stick those things on.
All right.
And then take a look at that diamond down at the bottom there.
All
and
right.
Cover up an eye or wink an eye.
Winking an eye.
Okay, see, I've got you seeing one thing with one eye and one thing with the other eye. So switch eyes there.
Okay.
Got it?
Got it.
Okay. So that's, yeah, you don't need that. Those are attractive sunglasses, but...
yeah, they're sharp.
So, yeah. So that's one of my test cards. Well, that's my primary test card when I'm doing a routine exam.
Cool.
So I test everybody the same.
So what are we looking for in this? What's supposed to happen?
Well, what they, they're during my routine exam, I'm having them look at that card. Now, when I start, rather than what I just had you do, I tell them, look, I need you to keep both eyes open. I need you to sit steady, both eyes open. I always tell them breathe, you know, that kind of stuff. So then during the test, I'll ask them, okay, look at the diamond and tell me, can you tell that there are little tiny letters inside the diamond?
Oh, yeah.
And they'll say, yes, I can tell. And I'll tell them, now they're really tiny. Some people think they look like dots in there.
Yeah.
But I want you to just look at the diamond, relax, just look at it normally as best you can, which is normal is a surprisingly hard concept to get across to people when they're in a test environment.
Right.
And again, I test everybody the same. Obviously, there are limitations. You don't test an infant the same, but I test everybody the same. So they're looking at the diamond, and I say, okay, does it ever look like one side goes black so you can't tell the letters are there? Now, I've told them to keep both eyes open. So they'll say yes. One side goes black. Okay, I'll usually tap their shoulder. You know, is it this side or is it this side? Well, it switches back and forth. Okay, tell you what I want you to do.
Right.
I started this years ago when I had a kid in who just couldn't. He kept tripping over his tongue. You know, he couldn't tell me what was going on, and so I said, okay, just raise a hand. And I've had colleagues tell me it's a stupid way to do things.
Okay.
But everybody knows how to raise a hand.
That's right.
So the child will be looking at that, a child or adult will be looking at that, and they'll say, what I want you to do is raise a hand on this side when it goes black, and then put it down when it's clear. Then raise a hand on this side when it goes black, and then put it down when it's clear.
Okay.
So then for some of the Job Corps people, I actually videoed what they were doing. Yeah. So they're looking at that, and it goes black, and it comes clear, and it goes black, and it comes clear. And what I do then, is time. Yeah. What the sequence of events is, and so that gives me an idea of what's going on with how their eyes work together. It also is something that then, when we treat them, I can look back on and say, okay, these are the changes, so I can measure the changes.
Because what they're reporting is like how often in a matter of time, and it changes with some treatment or different interventions, right?
Yeah. And then what I can do is I do a calculation now. I call it the percentage of binocularity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can calculate that. And then that again, that gives me another number that I can do two things. Number one, try to explain to people what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, yesterday I had a child in that the sequence of events was 2 to 3 seconds where one side would go off and then it'd come back on, and 2 to 3 seconds the other side would go off and then come back on. So it was about 50-50.
Okay.
So another way to phrase it would be that child sees now, and I always try to preface this by saying this is a very limited test.
Yeah.
What I'm doing now when I say these things is I'm projecting this test out into how you make it in the world.
Right.
But basically, this suggests that 50% of the time your child is seeing with both eyes simultaneously. Now, the first step there is you think, 50% of the time. That's not all that great.
No, not at all.
Does anybody see with both eyes all the time? Yeah, they do.
Mm-hmm.
I also then in trying to come up with ways to get that across to people, I actually looked at how grading is done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 90 and above is an A,
Right.
80 and above is a B, that kind of stuff. Well, 50% of the time is a flat fail.
That is.
And when we treat that, the majority of the time we can change a fail to an A.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of making both eyes see simultaneously.
Right.
Now, how that's done, this kind of jumps into the neurology.
Exactly.
And you know, we were talking earlier that a lot of what I do, a lot of what other vision therapists do, we're not talking eyes, we're talking brains.
Precisely.
Yeah. And you know, the eye receives the image, sends it up to, you see here, and the picture's put together here and here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a relay station right about there. And yes, there's one on each side. I did a deposition once for a car accident, and I said, relay station there, and the lawyer immediately asked, is there one on the other side? Yes, there's one on the other side. Okay, so we got you covered there now. But how eyes work, how the vision system works, there are two major pathways, they call them, two major nerve bundles going from the eye up to the brain up here, through that relay station, and that's where the action is. One pathway sees detail and color,
Mm-hmm.
one pathway sees motion.
Oh.
One of the responsibilities, motion is the foundation for everything. Visual motion is the foundation for everything.
Right.
And one of those pathways sees motion. One of the responsibilities of that motion pathway is to keep the other one awake.
Mm-hmm.
And if that stay awake motion message is not strong enough, then the detail pathway just drops out. That's what we see as the suppression. I use the analogy all the time of the mouse and the computer.
Okay.
You know, if you're, and of course one of these days everybody's switching to tablets, nobody will know what a mouse is anymore, so I'll have to find another analogy. But now everybody knows what a mouse is. If you're moving the mouse,
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing is sending a message to the computer that the mouse is moving,
Mm-hmm.
and the screen stays awake. Stop moving the mouse, stop sending that motion message to the computer,
Mm-hmm.
the screen goes blank, switches to screensaver.
Right.
That's how those two pathways operate. Now, where the analogy fails is when you stop moving the mouse, motion goes to zero.
Mm-hmm.
In the visual system at that relay station there, it takes about a 20% drop in activity in that motion pathway, and the detail pathway goes to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me. So, pardon me. When we talk about when we talk about problems with that motion pathway, and there's one of the early papers that made a big hit had to do with that motion pathway being involved in dyslexia.
Right.
And that was from Ralph Garcia was one of those, one of the guys who wrote that paper. Ralph's a great guy. But the that motion pathway again is the foundation for keeping everything awake.
Right.
And that's primarily what we do. So when somebody needs to be treated, we know two things. It's a problem in both eyes working together. The underlying defect is in motion detection. You put those two things together into a series of therapy procedures. And fixing a suppression is grunt work.
Okay.
You pound away and pound away and pound away.
I've heard it being referred to, at least in the younger, a homework process, right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes time, it takes repetition.
It takes time, yeah. Neurology changes with repetition. And also there's some old data where what makes adjacent nerves improve is by simultaneously pounding messages down both of them. Pounding is probably a bad term, but you get the drift. Pounding messages down both of them, they help each other make connections. And that's what we're about.
That's great. That's great. Doubling back a little bit about like the education world, you talk about folks in Job Corps, a little bit of that quality of life thing. How do people find themselves here needing vision therapy, and at what stations of life are they in? Are they at that career phase, or are they younger or older?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Sometimes I'm unsure how people find us.
Right.
Some of my staff may have ideas about that. That's another reason for publishing.
Exactly.
Now, one of the shortcomings of publishing is I can publish something in a journal.
Right.
That doesn't mean anybody's going to read it.
It's a particular audience.
Yeah. So publishing helps out, and we've got a website that's at least fun to some degree, that kind of thing. But I think in general, in the eye care world, among my colleagues, it's probably fair to say that for a fair number of them, when they have somebody who is driving them crazy,
yeah,
and they can't figure it out, and but they know they don't want to do the work, then they'll say, well, there is this guy up there or there's that guy over there that does therapy, and so let's try it. And there's a fair amount of word of mouth, of course.
Word of mouth.
And in this area, we have a lot of homeschoolers, and there's a lot of word of mouth in homeschoolers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We again, one advantage in doing things like publishing is when somebody says, well, I'm not so sure about that. You say, well, this is what we found.
Right.
And over time, that does seem to sink in a little bit, so that's good.
Great. Where I was coming with how people learn and find out about vision therapy in particular, I like how you talked about people with these intermittent central
suppression. Yeah.
It almost feels like in their learning career, like it's a personality trait as opposed to a physical problem or a neural problem.
There are some personality things that do go along with it.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things is every now and then somebody will talk about how my child changed, their personality changed when we got their eyes straightened around.
Right.
and you get they're both the kids who start out as the mushrooms.
Yeah.
You know that they don't want anybody. They don't want to talk to anybody. They're the kid in the corner that never causes any problem in school.
Right.
But they also don't achieve.
Exactly.
And then on the other side, you have the class clowns.
Uh-huh.
And the class clowns have figured out the thing to do is whenever anybody tries to make them do something, just make a joke out of it.
Make a laugh.
Yeah. And so the class clowns, I don't know that you can say that every class clown turns into an Einstein. When we straighten out their eyes.
Right.
I mean, they're pretty good at making jokes,
Yeah.
But the mushrooms are kind of interesting because the mushrooms, they kind of, all of a sudden they can deal with the world.
Right.
And something to understand about that is, when we straighten out, when we get both eyes working together,
Right.
that means that the eyes have more information about what they need to do.
Right.
But it also means that the brain has more information. And so somebody who's been a mushroom, that they just don't literally they don't see the world the same as you might.
Exactly.
And so one of the things one of the things I'll talk to adults about sometimes. We all have our favorite stories, and so I had a young woman in who, and again, I test everybody the same, and she was not in because she was having a reading problem, but I found the suppression on her.
Oh.
And so I usually, when we're talking about something else, contact lenses or whatever.
Exactly.
So we're concentrating on that, but I maybe don't give them a complete description, but I'll talk about this can interfere with things like reading because it interferes with picking up visual detail, and so I said. One of the things that happens a lot, that I hear about a lot, is that when you were in school, and this is a woman in her 20s, something like that.
Okay.
When you were in school, when you tried to read, then if somebody was reading, the teacher or your mom, it's usually mom, sorry, I don't mean to pick, but so you're reading along, did you read stuff and you'd miss a word? And your mom would say, okay, look at it. Mm-hmm. And so she'd stop, look at it, oh, that's what it is. And go on and read a little more, okay, look at, and mess something up. Mm-hmm. Okay, look at it. And okay, that's what it is. And the third time around, it's the same darn word, and she messes it up again.
The same word?
Same word.
Okay.
And then finally, the fourth time around, she reads it right. And everybody thinks, finally, the kid learned. And then she comes to the same word again and messes it up again. And that's when mom's about to launch and strangle the kid. The kid runs from the room screaming, all that kind of stuff. And I usually say it about that kind of way to people, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and she literally was laughing and crying at the same time because that's how she grew up.
Yeah.
And what that's about is the goof up that the suppression makes in the eye aiming and having to correct the eye aiming all the time, and just the randomness that the eye aiming error will cause in what she's looking at. Mm-hmm. So now we didn't do therapy on her, but because you asked about personalities. When you get somebody 25, 30 years old and above, they've made a lot of their life choices, and so they may or may not want to. I mean, circumstances may just not permit fixing it. So
circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, they're older, they've got a job, they've got a family, whatever.
Ah.
But maybe they think about their kids.
Yeah. We've talked to other professionals who've done their studies on different populations. We've seen some research done with boys in detention centers. And we've learned that, by and large, their quality of life was affected by their access to vision care. And without any access, they didn't perform well in school, and spiraled into this trajectory that led them into either missing school, which evolved into getting involved in crime, and what do you think about that kind of thing, not having vision care access and the connection to those kinds of trajectories?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. You know, again, one of the ways to look at it is that literally these people do not see things in a sustained, accurate manner as you might.
Right.
And so all of those tasks that they're instructed to do in school, pick on reading, we usually pick on reading, but you can pick on other things. The hierarchy of problems that we run into. Reading is number one, spelling and handwriting is next. Math, it's usually going to be lining up a column of numbers, or it's going to be when you hit story problems. And then sports problems, as I say to a lot of parents, as a group, it's very difficult to project individuals, but as a group, this is a group that's far more likely to catch a fly ball with their face. And so now take this kid who, you know, and throw in other things like perhaps they don't have the same family support, that kind of thing.
Right.
And take this kid and put him in a situation in school where we're pretty sure he's going to fail a lot. And so, again, if you fail when other people are succeeding, what are you going to do with your time? Well, again, you can be the class clown, something like that. But somewhere along the line, I mean, how long do you beat your head against the wall and you can't do the same thing as somebody else? And especially if, except for vision, if you're fairly smart.
Right.
What are you going to do? Well, you're going to find something to do with your time that's entertaining, maybe makes money. You know, so why not go steal a car? It's kind of fun.
Right.
You know?
Exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. You know, you steal the right car.
Yeah.
You know, you steal a Pinto, think again.
Yeah.
But
right.
Sorry if anybody owns a Pinto.
So we've had this subject we spoke to, a family, a Mendoza family, and the teachers recognized a disconnect between her academic performance, middle schooler, and that personality trait. The teachers gathered by the way she talked and the way she was able to do everything but reading in an intelligent way.
Right.
Didn't make a connection. But when it came to reading and the reading performance, the reading scores, the writing, there was a problem. They weren't as good, or she was taking excessive amount of time compared to her peers.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to realize that it was a binocular. I don't remember precisely what it was, but it's starting to sound like sustained
suppression.
I'm trying to remember. So with that said, in schools, in pop culture, we've talked about homeschoolers seem to be on the level of understanding that maybe it's a vision therapy kind of thing. Where do you see this kind of world being introduced or making that connection to the broader audience?
Okay, let me make sure I understand the question. So, how do, the way I might rephrase it is, how do we get the word out more?
Exactly.
Yeah. how do we get the word out more? That again, well, projects like this, of course, help out. But that again, I tend to view that from my world, obviously, and I tend to view the first hurdle as my colleagues. And so one of the things we did, for example, was, and I mentioned talking down at Gonzaga University. So that part of the motivation there is we had done a long-term study on therapy, and we had used some of the data from our Job Corps study to come up with a series of questions, quality of life questions, to send out to people. We sent them out to 50 folks who had completed therapy, and then we wanted to look at did the therapy last, and if so, because it lasted in my numbers. So did the therapy last in their lives? Well, what we found is yes, it did. And so from that, I was able to come up with a list of symptoms. Yeah, and so so these are symptoms, and I have many of these. You can have plenty. Great. But
could you read it for us?
Yeah, sure. So these are the symptoms. Yeah. These are the symptoms that we changed. Yeah. And that lasted significantly. So we asked. We had 13 questions that we sent out to folks, and we said, did it change a little? Did it change a lot? Right. Did nothing happen? Or did it change and then revert? And the way I did the statistics was, if it reverted, that was a big loss in the statistics. And so what we found is these are the six things that changed and stuck. During reading, words run together. The child skips or repeats lines when reading, misses small words when reading, reading comprehension is not good, trouble keeping attention on reading, and difficulty completing assignments. So all of those things, in fact, if you look at, and I got chastised for this from the editor of our journal, but if you look at dyslexia websites, there's a lot of overlap with those. And so I don't want to muck up, the diagnosis or non-diagnosis of dyslexia, but there's a lot of overlap.
There is, and it almost sounds like there's some overlap with things like attention deficit.
Sure. Yeah. And so when when you talk about difficulty completing assignments and trouble keeping attention on reading, you're talking those kinds of things. Why wouldn't there be a problem there? Right. When they don't see things consistently as we see things, why wouldn't there be a problem with attention? Kids are not stupid. No. If you have them looking at a piece of paper and it makes no sense, they're going to find something else to do. Exactly. Hello. And then they got an attention problem. Really? So we want to fix our eyes and do that. Anyway, you asked about getting the word out. Yeah. So what I did, of course, was come up with sticky notes. Yeah. And so gave them out to my colleagues, and a few of them grabbed them. Yeah. So we keep kind of going after the same kind of thing. Exactly. Just try to get more information out, get it out in ways that people understand. So I mentioned talking about grading. Giving somebody an F grade on how their eyes work, maybe that's more understandable than me talking about fixation. Now, everything we do involves fixation, and I can explain that too if you want.
Is this here?
But, okay. but not everybody, you start throwing out words like fixation, and that's not how normal people talk. That's how goofy people talk. You know?
Yeah, that's how
Yeah.
the eggheads talk.
Yeah, that's, exactly,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. And they're no fun.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, what happens during a suppression? You know, what your eyes want to do,
Right.
And what your brain wants to do is put two pictures together.
Right.
Well, if this picture drops out, then that eye can drift off target. There's nothing holding it as tightly as it could with the other eye. So then, as I was telling you, like the girl yesterday, there was 2 or 3 seconds where each eye had shut off, and then both eyes would see simultaneously. So for 2 or 3 seconds that happens.
Yeah, yeah.
Then this eye comes back on. Now she's got mush.
Okay.
All right, your brain looks at that, and she's not a dope.
No.
You know, her brain looks at that and says, this isn't right,
Right.
and puts it back together. And if it just happened once, she'd kind of go, ooh, what was that?
Yeah.
But it happens repetitively, keeps going and keeps going.
Right.
So these people literally are fighting to keep both eyes in the same place at the same time. What fixation is the process of keeping, actually fixation is each eye separately, but keeping it pointed is what it's supposed to do.
Okay.
And so when we start talking about suppression, eyes are always doing this. They get a little off target, snap back, a little off target, snap back. So they're always kind of twitching around.
Okay.
Add a suppression, gets further off target.
Ah.
Then snaps back, further off target, snaps back. One of the interesting things I found out from other people's research is fatigue interferes with that.
Yeah.
And so so when we're talking kids, I say, kids will say, wow, you know, reading kind of goes okay first thing in the morning, but by the afternoon, I can't do that.
Can't do it.
Well, what fatigue does is your eyes get further off target, and the correction is slower. So everything gets slower and sloppier as they get tired. That's one of the reasons that I think it's worth considering having reading glasses on a lot of kids. Reading glasses are great devices, you know, very difficult for a kid to hurt himself or herself with a pair of glasses, assuming we can teach them to not put them on sideways.
Okay.
That's about the only way they can hurt themselves.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. But glasses work here.
Yeah.
They don't work there.
No.
So glasses don't fix things. However, if we can reduce some of that fatigue effect, then maybe we get less of the wandering there.
You're talking about wandering and lenses. This is a new thing that I haven't thought of. You're saying that introducing reading glasses for children when they're reading, the glasses, they're not necessarily prescription style. They're like more like magnification is what you're talking about.
Well, the best way to think of it is it reduces the amount of work the focusing has to do.
Okay.
And so, and in theory, and we haven't done the research on this, and that's too bad.
Yeah.
But in theory, if I can use lenses and reduce the amount of effort, then maybe we keep that fatigue away.
Right.
Maybe later in the day their eyes aren't doing quite as much wandering.
Right.
That research, the folks who did that research, they started with an air traffic control paradigm.
Okay.
And so a simulation. And they found that eyes start to deteriorate in their ability to keep their aim at about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Now, air traffic controllers get breaks every 2 hours. So if you are flying, be afraid. But who was really interested in that was the military.
Right.
I, on the other hand, looked at it and thought kids.
Yeah.
But the military thought pilots. And so it's real research. It's out there. And perhaps, if we can reduce some of the fatigue, then kids do better. I think that probably explains some of the stories we have where somebody will give glasses to a kid and they do a bunch better. And I think that may explain some of that. And we did a long-term study looking at, do glasses actually change the suppression? No, they don't. But reading glasses may make it ever so slightly, not significantly, but ever so slightly better.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be part of that fatigue effect there too. That's a guess on my part.
I like how we're focusing on children and learning.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing I want to talk about is the screenings that are done in school that are done for acuity. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's more about sight and not vision.
Right, right.
Could you tell me what the differences between those two?
Sight and vision.
Yeah.
Sight is, can you see 20/20?
Right.
And 20/20 just means you see it 20 feet what you should see at 20 feet.
Right.
And so can you see 20/20? Can you see 20/20? You're good.
Mm-hmm.
It tells us nothing about the eye's ability to work together. And remember, when we have these things like a suppression that are neurological things, it's not like doing that, everything gets better.
Mm-hmm.
You can see 20/20, but everything. But it's not like that eye still isn't goofy in its aiming ability.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what those do. Most of the screenings, they've improved them a little in Washington by having kids look up close,
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing. One of the early things I did was look at testing for suppression. And this kind of fits what you're talking about, about screenings and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So change worrying about screenings in school to a typical eye exam. Okay? And so a typical eye exam, and when I say this, I'm not picking on anybody.
Okay.
If I'm picking on anybody at all, it would be on all of us in eye care not asking the right questions.
All right, there it is.
And so we have, there are a bunch of different tests for suppression.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things I did was compare them.
Mm-hmm.
The trigger for that was a long time ago. Most of my stories start with a long time ago now.
Okay.
But a long time ago, I had a kid in diagnosed as suppression. Then she got a second opinion. Her parents got a second opinion somewhere else. So I get this report back, and the guy says, "No, there's no suppression there because of this test. It was a depth perception test. Stereopsis is a technical term." And I said, "Wait a second." So back to this hand-raising thing that I have them do. So if I did an exam and the kid's in there raising her hand when things go away, or when things turn black on that or go away, I have the same kind of testing at distance. This is just an easy one to show you. So if the kid saw that same, or the kid is showing me the suppression in my exam, according to this guy's testing with stereopsis, then there's no suppression. So what's the deal? Either I hallucinated, or somehow I talked her into raising her hands randomly. You know, how can those two coexist? Well,
exactly.
Yeah. So what I did was test them, and most of our tests, I've started using nasty language for a lot of our tests, and I call them palliative tests. Now, palliative, most people, if they've heard the term palliative, it has to do with hospice, that somebody gets palliative care, and that means they're on their way out, let's make them comfortable. Well, with most of our tests for suppression, I call them palliative tests because they're palliative for the doctor. The doctor can show them a test, and they pass that particular test, and the doctor says, "You're fine." So he feels better, he sleeps well at night, pat the kid on the back, maybe give him a pair of glasses. Kid's still got a problem. And that's reflecting back to school screening. That, it's the same deal, is let's find some way to avoid actually diagnosing the problem and instead make us feel better. And it's the same deal, 2020, 2020, you're good, get out of here. And I don't know that there's a way out of that on a screening basis.
Okay.
I think, stuff like that, people asking questions
To start.
And what you were talking about, that the kid's smart. Most kids are smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. There just aren't that many real dummies out there, outside of politics, but that's a separate issue. So most kids are smart. So if you have a smart kid, and I admit, again, there are other things, families and all that, but if you have a smart kid and the kid can do this, but you put them in front of a book and they can't read, then where's the goof up? Well, if you can read them something, so the information goes in there, but you give them a piece of paper and the information comes in here and they can't do it, that should be a clue, So paying attention, talk about attention deficit. Maybe adults are the ones with attention deficits. Nobody pays attention.
Right.
So you can quote me on that. So.
For sure. So you had some pieces of data you talked about earlier. What kind of data was that?
Oh boy, now you opened a big can of worms on that one. Okay. Right. So the first big study we did was at Job Corps. Now when I say big, there's big and then there's big. I mean, I'm in private practice. That's how I survive. That's how I pay my staff. That's how I pay the rent. So I'm in private practice. So big is at Job Corps, we saw about 100 people from Job Corps. It worked out that we had before and after data on about 26 of them, something like that, which is still enough to do a lot of statistics on. So what we did was in 6 months, using rapid alternation, and I can show you what that's about, long distance, so without, excuse me, one of the things that does is reduce the placebo effect.
Okay.
I'm not there on a daily basis. Not that I could talk a bunch of teenagers into doing anything, but I'm not there with my arm around them,
right,
saying, "Boy, you can do this. You can do this." No, they're far away. I saw them twice. So what we did in 6 months, we raised their reading levels by I think it was about 6 years. Something like that. Believe it or not, I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, but it was 6 or 8 years reading level.
An improvement.
Quality of life scores we changed, and all of these. I don't know if you're familiar with statistics. I don't know a ton about statistics. But fortunately, spreadsheets now calculate stuff, and that's good. But you'll hear statistics about it'll be something like P is less than 0.01. What that means is there's one chance, one chance in 100 that this is a random event.
Right.
So we want the minimal chance of random as we can come up with.
Right.
Well, in our numbers, it was something like 1 in 10 or 100,000 that this was a random event. So that's how significantly we changed their quality of life scores. We changed I selected out some reading. Quality of life questions. We changed those at the same level. We decreased their suppression periods. We increased the amount of time that both eyes were seeing simultaneously.
Right.
And the biggie, obviously, is reading, that we made reading better. So I started off way back looking at the diagnosis. I'm trying to straighten out at least how I think we have to do that. Then we did the Job Corps study. So we diagnose them here. We take a look at them here. In between, we treat, and the reading gets better, and their symptoms get better. Then we we started talking about long term. So we did a long-term study looking at do symptoms hold together, and do my numbers hold together long term, and that's where those things came from. And
right.
Yeah, we looked at them 2.25 years down the way, and we lose maybe 5%, something like that. Well, on dealing with humans, that's not bad.
Not bad.
You know. And then then the latest one that we did was we were looking at do lenses make a difference long term, and it's pretty clear that if we treat the suppression with therapy, things get better. Their binocularity, their ability to use both eyes together gets a bunch better. With lenses, that's not the case. And again, with reading lenses, it may tweak it just a little better, but not very much.
Right.
And so, excuse me. So, if we diagnose the suppression correctly, if we treat it, can we expect that a bunch of people are going to get better? And reading is probably one of the big things that we talk about. Yeah. Is it perfect? No. When we get to perfection, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
You'll hear all about it. I'll send you a card from Tahiti, because that's where I'll be.
Yeah.
Does it last? Yes. And are there other treatments other than therapy, at least as far as my world goes? Are there other treatments other than therapy that has the same effect? No. So if we're going to treat the suppression, then we have to do therapy to treat it.
Right. And therapy is not a new thing. It's just new to a lot of people.
New to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And again, hopefully, hopefully we're answering the questions that are, when you talk about your original skepticism.
Yeah.
Well, the first level of skepticism is, okay, show me the test, because that, I don't know that makes any sense. And you're talking about eyeballs waving around. I look at him, I don't see his eyeballs waving around, So show me the test. Make sure I understand that. Then, what's the next thing? Well, can we treat it? Yes, we can treat it. And do we know how we can treat it? Yes, we know how we can treat it. And we know that glasses are great things, but it's not going to fix it. And then if we do treat it, and if we're successful in treating it, is it going to stay together? Yeah, unless you get your head knocked around, it's probably going to stay together. Okay.
So screening for binocular vision issues in preschool and grade school and among developmentally delayed populations. Dr. Pearson's great interest is getting young children appropriately diagnosed and treated. How do you feel about developmentally delayed populations and getting young preschool age students treated?
Developmentally delayed, that's a big broad area.
Yeah.
And preschool kids, at this moment, there's a lot of different things that we can do. A lot of different screening that we can do. There are different sort of perceptual kind of tests, that kind of thing that we can do, and that's all good. The problem we have as far as the suppression itself,
right?
The problem we have there is at the moment, and I've toyed around with different things, but at the moment we don't have a truly objective test for it.
Because some of them are inconsistent with what you've done in your second opinion you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and also I have to rely. We don't. What I say to parents, honest to goodness, and I say, of course, the kids in there when I say this, but I say, I don't have a way to drill into the side of his head and just wire him up and see what's happening. And most of the time, the parent just says, "Oh, go ahead."
Right.
But I don't have a truly objective way to come up with that. That's one of the reasons that I think symptom lists are kind of a good thing. I worry about long symptom lists, and so that's why I like our short one there.
Yeah.
So since I don't have a truly objective measure, then that means I have to rely on their responses. And so because of that, I can get a pretty good idea what's going on at 4 or 5, depending on the kid.
Right.
But the reliability obviously gets a lot better as you get 6, 7, 8, that kind of stuff. And I'm enough of a wacko about wanting accuracy that I always worry at 5 if we're really getting a good reading on things.
Right.
Now the good news is that even if I can't get, and I think about a developmentally delayed guy that we took care of a long time ago, Robert, and I couldn't get near him. He'd seen one too many doctors, and so I could not get near him. But the mom said, "No, I see all the symptoms, so let's do therapy." And the good news with therapy is it's pretty tough for us to kill somebody in therapy,
Yeah.
And so if I have Robert and he can't respond, but he will do some of the therapy techniques, then we're not going to hurt him. We're probably going to make him better, and somewhere along the line, we're gonna get both enough visual input to the brain, and we're also going to be in good enough. What's the word I want? Robert and I are going to be on a good enough level that I can get near him.
Right.
And then we're going to learn more. So that's the hang up with preschool testing is it's subjective.
Okay.
And it has to be.
Yeah.
We don't have an objective test.
Okay. So when it comes to public education and the screenings we've talked about that happen in schools, should parents, educators, and students be assured that 20/20 vision is good enough to read? And read
No.
well?
Did you want more on that?
Yeah.
No. Again, that tells us very little about how eyes work, other than, and I'll try to come up with a good analogy about this, but I don't have one right off the bat. But it tells us very, very little.
Yeah.
About how eyes work. How about this? In a dynamic situation. Reading is not static. In fact, eyes aren't static. But for that one test, we make everything static and say, "Can you see?" Okay, now go out and play ball. Oh, the ball hit you in the head.
Yeah.
Well, get your hands up next time. Come on, try harder. You can do it. Just try harder. Yeah.
Right. So getting back to tests and screenings and a part of the examination, is there a development of a standardized screening tool that pediatricians and others working with foster children to use before foster children get a proper diagnosis? Is that the question?
Excuse me. Yeah, there really isn't a standard. Again, I'd fall back on symptoms. Because there are different tests you can throw at people, but I don't think they're in a screening environment. They're not going to tell us as much as I would like. Everything that they can learn in a screening is going to be helpful.
Right.
I mean, it's even helpful. Yeah, the kid sees 20/20. That takes a load off as far as is there some horrible eye disease or something. Right. So everything is helpful. But I think they're limited, and so no. Again, I'd probably fall back on symptoms as being
okay. We need ophthalmologists to understand that if to surgically straighten a misaligned eye, that the brain needs training through vision therapy or maybe quartz lenses. Do you have any ideas about working better with ophthalmologists?
We actually got a referral from a retina surgeon in town, which stunned me. Again, one of the things I said earlier is when my colleagues have these people that they don't know what to do with, send them to the wacko over there and see what he can do. And that's kind of how this referral came from the retina surgeon. But one of the things is that he works in a very large clinic, and one of the things was he talked to some of the people, I think, who had seen some of our research, and or they might have been at one of the presentations, and so they said, okay, well, try there. There's been some change in the world of ophthalmology on not on surgery, but on amblyopia, on patching. There's been a little bit of change there. There was just an article that came through. But one of the things to remember, although it's important, if somebody's got amblyopia and only is seeing with one eye really and that kind of stuff, it's important to try to fix that. But it's also worth remembering amblyopia is like 1-2% of the population. Yeah. And the intermittent suppression is probably 20% of the population. So that's why my focus has been there. Although we've done research on amblyopia, that's why more our focus is on the non-amblyopia, non-strabismus, non-eye turn side.
So we need to let the public know that getting glasses that addresses stigmatism does not mean that their optometrist has tested or treated for a variety of binocular vision issues. So a lot of parents stop at the lenses.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And very common that fairly common, I think, anyway, that we will have kids in who have had had glasses, and whether you want to pick on astigmatism or whether you want to pick on reading glasses. So one of the fairly common thing that happens, whatever fairly common means, is somebody will be in and they have some reading glasses, or they have some glasses, period, and occasionally the parents are a little upset because we got these darn glasses and they didn't fix it. And my response to that is a couple of things. Well, good, now we know we got to do something else because obviously glasses didn't fix it. And the other thing to remember about glasses excuse me, is in the world of healthcare, where you can drop thousands of dollars on MRIs, you can drop thousands of dollars on medications, different things like that. A couple of $100 for a pair of glasses, that's pretty small. And so even if they don't fix it, the correct in my view, the correct answer is, okay, now we know, let's move on. And so I would not want to be in the position of saying it was stupid to get a pair of glasses. No, it's, you know, we tried it,
Mm-hmm.
and the risk with a pair of glasses is vanishingly small.
Okay.
And so, again, if we can teach the kid to not put them on sideways,
Mm-hmm.
he's probably going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
But now we know we may have wasted a little time
Mm-hmm.
and a little money, but how often do people waste time and money, for goodness sakes?
Yeah, really. So what's the connection between migraine headaches and vision problems?
That's a good question. And anytime somebody answers with "that's a good question," that means I have no stinking clue. Actually, you know, we do see folks that number one, one of the first things to try with
Mhm.
migraines is glasses.
Right.
And so one of the things I run into is a lot is one eye will aim a little higher than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so you use some prisms to level things up, and that gets a bunch better. Sometimes during therapy, and if it is a binocular problem, then as we straighten out the binocularity, then we should see a decrease in that kind of stuff.
Right.
One of the things that's I like knowing why.
Yeah.
Why is probably the big question that plagues my life.
Mm-hmm.
Why does something happen, or why does it not happen? So why does somebody get a headache?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we trigger migraines versus just stress headaches?
Right.
That's a lot tougher question to answer. But stress headaches makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if somebody's, especially now with everybody looking at the computer,
Reading a lot.
yeah, and looking at it like that and trying to make it clear and trying to keep it single and all that. Well, duh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably going to get a headache. Yeah.
Compound that with the motivation behind that much reading, whether
Yep.
it's work-related, school-related,
Exactly.
or just, I think now we're dependent on reading and screens to do everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Everything.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great. Could you provide us some education on patching? You talked a little bit about patching earlier. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
My view on patching has changed ever so slightly lately. We did a study using rapid alternation. We did a study with New England College of Optometry on amblyopia.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found is, and we didn't go into amblyopia here, but what we found is we made kids see better, and we improved their depth perception. So we made their eyes work together better, just using rapid alternation. 3/4 of those kids had some patching before our study. Excuse me, the company that produced that variety of glasses to do that, they just finished a study in China, and they did not come up with the same results we did.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we came up with in our study that this is when the professors started to call me, is they got real world changes in depth perception. So one of the kids played ice hockey, and all of a sudden he's playing ice hockey better.
Wow.
Now you take ice hockey is a full family sport. You know, it's expensive. Kids travel, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So we're treating his amblyopia, but all of a sudden his ice hockey improves. Now everybody's interested. You know, I mean, actually, Dad is actually interested when there's ice hockey involved. You know, and so the professor calls me. Can you believe that? Well, yeah, I can believe that. It's not not anything dramatically crazy or anything like that. But the China study didn't come up with the same improvements that we saw. Again, I go back to, well, why is that? Now, patching has been around since the Egyptians, since they were building the pyramids. And most of the research on amblyopia has involved patching. And the reason is that it's through the National Institutes of Health, National Eye Institute. Well, who's on the boards there? It's generally the eye surgeons, and they patch. So they do a lot of studies on patching. And patching has not very good compliance, and it does make things better, but then things tend to drop back some. But if they do drop back, you can do it a second time, and it gets back to where it was.
Right.
Kids hate it in general, you know. Yeah, the old thing about, well, you look like a pirate, only lasts so long, you know. And it probably doesn't have quite as much oomph with girls as it does with boys, you know. A girl pirate, oh good. Anyway, so, but one of the things that I think I can put together from the two studies, and it wasn't clear on the China study, but it looked like that they had not had any treatment. And so if that's true, it's possible that some patching prior to actually doing something that makes eyes work together might help. That's as strong a positive as you're going to get out of me on patching.
Okay.
What I want to do is make eyes work together.
Exactly. Could you provide us with some motivation behind good vision skills are essential to being a part of the student's education and becoming adults?
Well, again, yeah, you know, it's all about providing stable, reliable information to the brain. The brain's in charge. So when you have eyes going on and off, then the brain is not getting the information it needs. I think in terms of trying to make the eyes work, but if we make the eyes work, what we're doing is feeding the brain proper information. And most people have an A1 brain. It's just getting the information up there. So that means if we can do that, there should be less problem with schoolwork, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If there's less problem in schoolwork, you got to think they're going to do better through life. I mentioned the bricklaying guy. One of the people we took care of was one of Gonzaga's women's basketball players. Taller and tougher than me, you know. Wow, they make. I mean, you can tell we are not part of the same gene pool. And she was when I first. She'd had every test in the book.
Okay.
And she'd also had some therapy of different sorts, you know. And when I first came in to see her, she was sitting in a chair, kind of like this, you know, kind of like, so what do you think you're going to do to me, you know? And so I diagnosed the suppression, explained it to her. She said, "Let's fix it." And as a Division I athlete, when she says "let's fix it," she means it. Well, I caught a few of her games before we got her eyes fixed. I caught a few of her games on TV, and she's a forward, so she's always, as they say, banging against people, right? And so she's getting lots of free throws. And it sounded like, her shooting a free throw sounded like back in the 70s that when some of the bands figured out they could use a gong, you know, bong, bong, never went through. It hit the rim and went off, you know. So we got her eyes fixed. We got rid of the suppression. When I say get her eyes fixed, I mean we got rid of the suppression. Both eyes are seeing simultaneously. She went to China for a tournament, hit 90% of her free throws.
Wow, that's a huge improvement.
That's a big improvement. Now, when you talk about student versus adult, well, what does 90% free throws mean to an athlete? That means she gets a job in Europe playing basketball. Playing.
Yeah.
I mean, you and me, we got to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's playing, and they're paying her, you know? So, again, it's the same kind of thing. We get her eyes straightened around, then she can do what she wants to do and what she's designed to do and what she's done, you know, what she's put together physically about what she wants to do. She can do that at a higher level. Well, if she can do that at a higher level, she's going to be a successful adult. Now she's back here doing something with the coaching staff, I guess. So, thank God, yeah, kind of nice. She hasn't been back to see me yet, though. I need to track her down.
Yeah.
So.
Send us tickets.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Bingo.
Cool. We got through the questions. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
Cool. That's all the questions that I had. All right.